it was freeing to be able to just sit down and write words. On the other hand, structurally, I opened every chapter with an anecdote, which is either you can say that's TV or you can call it a Wall Street Journal ahead. But I wanted to bring you into the book through an event, and through an event involving a person. I want you to care about these people.
Hi, David.
Hi, Deb. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. How's your day going so far?
Today's pretty good. Nice weather. The dog is sleeping behind me. My wife's out shopping and will be back soon, so the day is lovely.
Awesome. If your dog's anything like mine, the minute she comes back to the house, it's going to be bark, 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 bark.
Bizarrely, this is an old dog and she has gone deaf. So she will not know that my wife has come back until I take her, until I literally carry her. I carry her down the stairs because the legs don't work that well anymore. We love her. She's a puggle by the name of Lofi.
Oh, and that reminds me. I had a puggle who passed recently.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I say recently. It's been a year, but he was 15.
No, that's recent. Yeah. Buffy's 16 and her, quote, sister, I mean, they weren't from the same litter, but our other dog of the same era also passed recently. So.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. But Buffy's here to make us happy, so that's okay.
So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I'm a 50-plus year journalist in various forms. I was born in New York, grew up in Western Massachusetts, and found out that a local prep school had a carrier current radio station, and convinced my parents that I wanted to go to that prep school as a day student because I wanted a better education, when in fact what I wanted to be was on the radio.
So you were devious from a young age.
I was devious from a young age and got a good education in the process, and then ended up following broadcasting jobs all over the country. I was an investigative reporter at various television stations. Then I joined NBC News, went overseas to cover all sorts of big events. I walked through the Berlin Wall the night it opened. Came back to the States, was a show producer for NBC and then ABC, and then opened my own production company, which eventually led to Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. I married my broadcast lawyer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, proposed on the first date seemed like the thing to do. We have...
Well, when you know, really.
You know. Also, one of the great things about working at NBC was you're in 30 Rock, which is this fantastic building, which I don't think it's still open anymore. But at the time, they had a bar in the Rainbow Room on the 65th floor. And so when you convince your lawyer to go for a drink with you after work, it's a hell of a setting in which to say, by the way, do you want to get married? So that worked out. We have a wonderful daughter who is actually a poet. And we live on a little vacation island in the Jersey Shore. And these days, I'm writing another book and also doing a radio show on music of the Great American Songbook. So that's me in a nutshell.
You have had a very busy life. And I have to say, you have a wonderful voice for a radio show.
Thank you. Actually, it's a little deceiving because if I could have...
Is this your radio voice?
No, this is my regular voice. But the problem is, from a technical standpoint, it's not good enough for voiceover work. I'd have killed to have been Don LaFontaine or Dan Ingram, one of those guys who read all the commercials, but I crack in the low register. Don't tell anyone.
Well, now all 300 listeners know.
Okay. Sorry, guys.
So let's talk about your latest work, Food Americana. Where did you get the inspiration for it?
I grew up without much of a focus on the quality of food. It was put in front of me. I ate it, and I ate too much. But I wasn't, as a child or a young adult, what you'd call a foodie. And
Mhm.
then NBC called me up in the Chicago bureau one day and said, "Would you like to move to England?" And I said, "Okay." But
Right.
I had
Sounds fun.
never, yeah, it was fine. I had never considered the possibility of living outside of the United States. Frankly, I hadn't really much thought about visiting outside the United States. Um, I had unintentionally, I guess, kind of a xenophobic view. And when I got to London, and from there I moved to Frankfurt and then to Budapest, but my
Mhm.
mandate was basically Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And I found myself going to country after country that I unfortunately knew almost nothing about.
Mhm.
And as I schooled myself, I realized that one of the gateways to a culture, to a society, to a people is their food.
Mhm.
That eating with people, eating their food, talking with them about it helps you learn, reveals a lot about the history of a place, the mindset of a place. I mean, there is importance to the fact that in France, you don't walk down the street eating a sandwich for lunch. The work life balance in France requires that you sit down and have a lunch. And that's
Okay.
reflective of the society. Um, by the same token, in Greece, the meza, the small plates that you find on the table, are reflective of a society that deeply values socializing, spending time with other people.
Right.
The philosopher Epicurus, and yes, there was one, and that's where the word Epicurean comes from, was quoted as saying that you should select your dining companions before you decide what you're going to eat, because to eat by yourself is to be like a wolf, not
Okay.
non-social.
Mhm.
In Tuscany, the fact that so many of their dishes are based in wild boar as the protein source reflects the fact that this was an incredibly poor region for a very long time, where if you were going to eat, you had to catch it yourself off the land. So that uh, that sense of food and culture and history struck me deeply.
Mhm.
When I moved back to the States, still working in network news, I now had a new way to look at food and to evaluate food, and my interest continued to grow to the point where when I went out on my own, I developed diners,
Mhm.
drive-ins, and dives,
Right.
which allowed me to further my interests in food, how it related to people, how it related to the culture. And finally, at one day, I looked up and said, I want to write a book
Okay.
about this, because it had been festering makes it sound like a bad thing. It's not a bad. It was smoldering. Let's put it that way.
Mm. I think any writer
Inside me,
understands
yeah.
that feeling.
Also, there's a subtext to that. Every TV producer thinks I can write a book,
Mhm.
because what people don't know is writing for television is in some respects harder than writing prose, because what you can write and what you need to write are dictated by what you have on video. You have to write
Okay.
to it and you have to explain it. It's not, you can't just sit down at the keyboard and write, "It was a dark and stormy night," and then Oedipus killed his father. You
Mhm.
have to, sorry, it was his, no, it was his father. Yeah. And kind of deep inside all of us is this desire to simply be able to sit down and just let the words come out without having to think about integrating them with visuals, and frankly,
Mhm.
subsuming them to the three-dimensional story that you're trying to tell through pictures and sound. Um, so I said, "Hey, let's write a book," and I did. Took longer than I thought. Took 2 years. I expected one, but I was kind of dumb in the way I chose my first book, in that each chapter is on a different food item or food way. And
Uh-huh.
only after I got into it did I realize I had to do as much research for each chapter as I might have had to do for a book on that subject. So it it,
Okay.
it took quite a while. Now, it was an enjoyable
Mhm.
process. And I really had a good time, and I managed to learn a lot. One of the things I faced was, am I rambling? You okay with
Uh,
this?
this is a good
Okay.
ramble. Go ahead.
One of the things I found quite quickly, remember, I come from, among my many backgrounds in journalism, I
Mhm.
spent a long time as an investigative reporter, an
Mhm.
investigative producer, and then I was the senior investigative producer for 2020. So the concept of pinning down facts and truth is very important to me. And I
Mhm.
found that in the world of food history, there's an awful lot of BS out there. If you read the stories that keep getting repeated, every single thing on earth was invented at the 1904 World's Fair. Uh,
I don't think I'd ever heard that.
allegedly the ice cream cone.
R
It
Okay.
wasn't.
So a lot of the classic Americana food.
Allegedly the hamburger. It wasn't.
Mhm.
Meantime, there are several places across the country that claim to have invented the hamburger, none of which is provable and much of which is pretty demonstrably untrue. So
Mhm.
it was interesting in chasing the facts behind foods to be able to determine what was true and what was a legend.
Interesting. Um, I don't know why this is reminding me of every time I go see my grandmother in Pennsylvania, we pass a little tiny ass dive bar, and their
Mhm.
sign says that they have the 3rd hottest hot wings in the world.
Well, they declared it, so they're
I
right.
know.
I
And I
mean,
remember my husband and I, we always joke about, "How do they know it's the 3rd?" I mean,
well,
that's
you
an
don't want to
interesting
claim
thing to
first.
I know, it's so interesting that they're like, "Well, we're clearly not the best, and we're not the 2nd best, but we're pretty darn good."
Well, what's great about it is you're talking about it. It worked.
Exactly, here I am talking
It
about it.
worked.
What was your favorite part about doing the book? Like, which section, I guess, did you like the best?
Well, there were two sections that particularly pleased me. I had a really good
Mhm,
time with all of them. Number one, I'm a New York Jew of a certain age. My
mhm,
death row meal is lox, bagels, and cream cheese. Spending time at Russ and Daughters, which
mhm,
is a more than 100-year-old appetizing store on the Lower East Side of New York,
mhm,
appetizing mostly being smoked fish. It was an immigrant standby for years. Being able to spend time with those folks was just delightful, especially because they let me go behind the counter and
ooh.
attempt to slice lox, which
I like
is
that you said attempt to slice.
well, I ended up with a pile of mush. It is an
Mhm,
incredibly difficult thing to do. Um, the gentleman who had been doing it for 40 years, who has since retired, who was trying to teach me, as with many of the appetizing stores these days, was from Central or South America.
mhm,
The counterman job is um, not stocked by a whole lot of Jews anymore. But you have these people who've been with these shops forever. They're as much
mhm,
a part of the family as if they were born there. Nonetheless, going behind the counter with them was terrific. And what was great, remember, as I said, as a kid, I was in New York. My grandparents on my father's side lived on the Lower East Side. So this was like falling back into my childhood. And
mhm,
the patrons of the store were such wonderful characters to talk to. A guy named Bob Bozick, who had been a heavyweight fighter. His claim to fame was that he survived fighting Larry Holmes without getting knocked out, and he was glad, eager to show me the picture from his wallet of him with Larry Holmes.
mhm.
But he told great stories about being an up and coming boxer and going and hanging out with the Jewish mobsters who ran boxing in New York at the time,
Oh my
as
god,
he
that sounds like
tells
an
it.
amazing book right there.
Thank you. And he would go, and there was this one gangster who was the kingpin of boxing, and they would get appetizing from Russ and Daughters, and then everyone would pull their chairs up around his bed, and they'd eat whitefish and lox and just schmooze about who was up, who was down. That was great. That was fantastic.
Mhm,
The other and there were a number of things again that I really enjoyed, like going to pizza school in San Francisco. But I went to Memphis in May. The what
Mhm.
some people consider to be the Super Bowl of barbecue championships. Other people would
Mhm.
argue for the Royal in Kansas City. I'm a Memphis in May guy. Anyway, when I
Mhm.
was looking into, I wanted to go to Memphis in May, and when I
Mhm.
started looking into it, I found, much to my astonishment, that a two-time grand champion there, they had won the previous year, was The Shed, a barbecue joint in Mississippi that I had profiled on diners, drive-ins, and dives. So I called them up and said, could I be a fly on the wall with you guys? And they said,
Mhm.
come on down. So it gave me, as a writer, it gave me a universe. I told this whole story from my base of hanging out with them
Mhm.
and their battle to repeat as champion. And from that, I was able to explore the rest of the event. But the event itself was this orgy of pig fat. It was just extraordinary. I mean, I've never had, well, once I had. It's a different kind of barbecue. This is pork barbecue. It was unbelievable. And again,
I just
a-
but you're making me hungry.
as a writer, you know, to really be a writer, you have to be curious and you want to experience stuff. You want to meet
Mhm.
people. There was this guy sitting in his tent by himself on a high top stool, and I went up and interviewed him because his barbecue joint was from Illinois, and I thought that's weird.
Mhm.
Barbecue in Illinois, and I asked him a whole bunch of questions, and then I realized after I got back to my hotel room, he was one of the past multiple winners of this thing. He was a leading figure in barbecue, and I had interviewed him, like interviewing Babe Ruth like he was a rookie. So I went
Okay.
back the next day and said, "I'm so embarrassed." He said, "Nah, don't worry about it." And then I talked to the guys from the Japanese Barbecue Association who were over here competing, and it
Mhm.
was just, I mean, it was a woman who was a judge who had stopped by the Shed's tent, and I was talking with her, and I admired the barbecue watch she was wearing, so she took it off and gave it to me. I mean, it was a
It
lovely
sounds like you
event.
had an amazing experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole idea, and I guess this comes from 50 years as a journalist, but if I'm going to tell you about something, I better damn well be able to describe it to you.
Mhm. I mean, I love that you traveled for this book, and, uh,
And I
I
couldn't
feel like a
travel
lot.
as much as I would have wanted to, because
Oh,
let's
yeah?
face it, the economics. There were a number of
Mhm.
things where I had to hire freelancers in various
Right.
places to do things
Where
for
didn't you
me.
get to travel to that you wanted to?
The Buffalo Hot Wings Festival
Mhm.
would have been very nice. I mean, I would have wanted to travel every place I could, especially to
Mhm.
Phoenix, where there's a phenomenal artisanal pizzeria called Pizza Bianco, run by Chris
Mhm.
Bianco, who is very much, in some respects, the leading artisan in the revival of artisan pizza. Couldn't get out there. But I had someone go to the place, and I talked to all of these people at great length. And if I had a freelancer go someplace, I had them send me videos and pictures, and so
Nice, yeah.
I was
And
able to
describe the way
experience
it
it.
smells. Seems like that
Oh,
would
yeah,
be
absolutely.
important.
Well, that's one of the hard things, is explaining, making food. I was going to say taste good, but beyond that, taste in any way. You have to
Mhm.
bring people into food. I mean, in television, you can do it. Not a lot of people do, but you can do it through sound. When
Mhm.
when I was doing diners, we used to spend 23 hours audio sweetening each episode, so that when you saw the burger go on the grill, even though it was hard to hear under the hood, we would add the sound of the burger going onto the grill, all of which would help you salivate, uh,
Mhm.
help you enjoy the experience. With pros, you just have to explain it. I mean,
Mhm.
in the barbecue section, I found myself, you write, then you edit, then you edit, then you edit. I must have removed the word glistening 500 times from my initial draft, because how else do you describe massive amounts of pig fat dripping
Mhm.
down onto a smoker? It was the shed folks, their smoker for their competition hog, because they cook whole hog barbecue, was built into the side of an old Willys Jeep. It was
Okay.
just great. And what I did when they were ripping the meat apart to send the boxes to there's two kinds of judging. One, some judges come to you, but then there's the
Mhm.
blind box competition where you put it in a box and the box has a number and the other judges don't know who you are when they taste the food. After
Mhm.
they filled the blind boxes to send up to the judges, I just held back in the trailer they'd been cutting them in, and I just gorged. I stole all the leftovers. It was fantastic.
So you've mentioned diners, drive-ins, and dives a couple times. How was writing the book different than writing the show? How does that you
The
said
words,
writing for TV
words,
was harder, and
yeah, the words
how?
came first. In diners, writing for television, if it's done right, is an invisible process. You're
Mhm.
supposed to push the viewer without them realizing they're being pushed from one
Mhm.
event to another. So you're writing around things, you're writing the second half of a sentence that someone started, you are referring to subtly, I hope. I hate when someone says, when there's a sunset and someone says in the script, sunset over the Schmeggy farm. What they should say when you see the sunset is, in only 5 hours, this family will find out if they lose their farm. I mean, referring to the sunset without saying it's a
Mhm.
sunset. Writing the book, well, first of all, I wrote it very much to feel like a stream of consciousness conversation.
Mhm.
Um, Secondly, um, I my structure was very much TV like in that I based as much as I could around actual events with people and their quotes.
Mhm.
Um, but I had the ability to say things without having to have a visual to back them up. In other words, I opened the pizza chapter with me um, just about burning myself to death trying to turn a pizza inside a pizza oven at Tony Gemignani's pizza school, and
Mhm.
realizing that in this class I was not the smart kid.
Okay.
Um, that was me telling a picture story the way I wanted to tell it without having to look at the video and say, well, what did we catch? Did we
That's
catch my
true.
face looking unhappy? If not, how do I tell that story? It
Mhm.
was it was freeing to be able to just sit down and write words. On the other hand, structurally, I opened every chapter with an anecdote, which is either you can say that's TV or you can call it a Wall Street Journal A head.
Mhm.
But I wanted to bring you into the book through an event, and
Okay.
through an event involving a person. I want you to care about these people. I want you to care that this couple spent 96 hours in line waiting for this White Castle to open, as a way of you understanding just how much White Castle means to some people. Um,
I have to confess, I've never had White Castle. We don't
uh,
have one around here, and I've never experienced it.
well, White Castle, people don't realize this. White Castle was the beginning of the fast food hamburger. And it was also the savior of the entire hamburger element of our cuisine. In the
Really?
1920s, shortly after Upton Sinclair's book, well, Upton Sinclair wrote a book called The Jungle.
Mhm.
It was fiction, but it was based on his undercover reporting in slaughterhouses in Chicago.
Mhm.
The book scared the bejesus out of America about the way in which meat was processed. and made it
Mhm.
real clear that horrible, unsafe, unsanitary, dangerous food was being sent out of these slaughterhouses. And as a result, the worst of the worst was considered to be hamburger. So Americans were terrified of chopped meat from like 1906 to 1920. In
Mhm.
1921, um, White Castle opened, and what they decided, what the owner decided, was I'm going to convince people that hamburgers are safe. So
Mhm.
I mean, I say opened. He took over an existing hamburger stand and then turned it into a
Okay.
chain. But the way he did that was to build a place that was entirely reminiscent of a hospital or medical facility in that it was all white porcelain and stainless steel. What could be cleaner than that? The
Mhm.
food preparation area was in full view of the customers, and it
Mhm.
was White Castle that resurrected the hamburger as an item that was safe. It was also White Castle that figured out the assembly line method of making hamburgers to the extent that White Castle burgers are square. They're
Mhm.
square because that makes it possible to get more of them on the grill at the same time. It
Mhm.
was White Castle that figured out that there should be assembly stations, the whole assembly line method of making
Okay.
fast food. It was not Ray Kroc at McDonald's who invented this.
I was just thinking that I think McDonald's has a different story here.
Well, McDonald's came later, and McDonald's
Mhm.
basically improved upon this concept. And
Mhm.
then McDonald's franchised. White Castle never did. All White Castles are company owned, so they never grew the way Burger King did. But White Castle is responsible for the American fast food hamburger. And White Castle is good. If you like that kind of food, it's very
Mhm.
hard to taste any meat in a White Castle because it's a tiny burger in a substantial bun where the basic flavor is the onions that are on top of it.
Okay. I have heard there's a lot of onions on
Yeah,
White
they're
Castle.
small. You can eat a dozen of them. Their slogan has always been "Buy them by the sack." Um, and these days they've become kind of a retro nostalgia thing. They've just opened two massive White Castles, one in Phoenix and one in blah blah blah. I think Florida. Yeah, I think
Okay.
Orlando. So they're having a moment.
Mhm.
Um, they're good. They're I wouldn't suggest a diet based on them,
Mhm.
but they're fine. They're
Yeah,
historic.
just yeah, I'm in, like, upstate mid New York, and they just have not made it here.
Well, what's your burger place of choice? You must have a local burger joint or a local
Mm.
hot dog joint or a local
It's
barbecue
it's
joint.
it's hard. I'm actually allergic to wheat.
Oh no.
I know. So, it's very
Oh,
hard for me to have one of those.
it's tough to be a beer drinker and you're gonna have a
Yep,
problem
I
with
can't drink
pizza.
beer anymore, yeah.
Oh, what a shame.
Mhm. I get hives and yeah, I'm actually just allergic to it.
Oh no. That's a waste.
Mhm. I know, I can't eat a lot of
Yeah, I'm
stuff.
sorry. I did a syndicated series called Beer Geeks, all about
Mhm.
craft beer. So um, I developed a taste for it that I didn't really have before the show.
Well, the burger places around here, I don't know, the best places are probably, like, the local bar/pubs, that give you the good stuff, but, I mean, you have Five Guys, Burger King,
Yeah, but those are you must have a
Wendy's.
local
Yeah.
guy. I mean, is it Calvin Trillin, the famed writer who will tell you he's not a food writer, but who did an awful lot of important writing on food? I was
Mhm.
lucky enough in the course of researching the book to have lunch with him. And he firmly believes that everyone needs to believe that the best burger in the world is the one they grew up loving. So for him, he
Mm.
grew up in Kansas City, so his favorite burger is Winstead's. If
Okay.
you grew up in Minnesota, it had to be Culver's. It's just that's And we
Mhm.
found this on diners. Frequently, people would recommend places that were their childhood favorites. And when you'd look into it, the food really wasn't that good. It wasn't good enough
But
to
it's the
put on the
memories
show,
attached to
but it
it.
was their place.
Mhm. They have a good memory of
Yeah, and
something
that's
about
fine.
that, and that's yeah, it's like songs. Like, your favorite song isn't necessarily a good song, just you have a good memory attached to
Oh,
it.
no, all of my favorite songs are good songs. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm of
My
a
husband
certain
tells
age.
me the
Yeah.
same thing, yeah.
Okay.
So, how are the 2 processes different between television and the book? How does your writing process have to change?
It it didn't change that much because I
Hmm.
approached it structurally
Mhm.
as much like television as I could, in that the things I like about television stories are focusing on individuals and finding detail that'll make someone, I mean, we used to call it holy shit Martha. Can I swear on this?
Absolutely.
Okay. My
I do
my
all the
okay.
times.
You're looking to put something on the screen that would make someone watching look up and go, "Holy shit, Martha, look at that. I didn't know that," to keep their
Mhm.
interest. In writing, um, I didn't change the concept of writing for the year. I wrote as I spoke. And in
Mhm.
fact, I had trouble with the copy editors, because I intentionally write for emphasis. I'll cut a sentence in half, put a period halfway through, then capitalize the word that begins the second half of the sentence for emphasis.
Mhm.
Um, and that's not technically grammatically correct. So I was getting a lot of
Mhm.
corrections back. And I finally had to have a come to Jesus and say, no, no, if you have a real serious problem with this, talk to me, but don't go changing my style. Okay.
Right.
I
At that
know
point, it
the
is
Yeah,
stylistic.
I know the rules I'm breaking. Now, you can't break rules until you know them. There's a lot of real shitty TV that's being made because these young kids today never learned the rules of cutting video,
Mhm.
having come up in an era where jump cuts and various other tricks were properly employed by those who knew how to use them because they knew the rules they were breaking.
Mhm.
You got a generation that early on just figured you could slap video together any way you want. No, you got to know the rules before you break them. But when you
Mhm.
break them, you got to break them for emphasis or import. Um,
This is reminding
secondary.
me a lot of artists, like,
Hmm.
the impressionist artists
Oh yeah,
or the modern ones. I mean, they could paint classically beautifully. I mean, you
yeah.
everybody says, "Well, I could do that," and you have to be like, "No, no, they are trained. They're actually very good, and they just chose this is a style."
I had a meal at Alinea in Chicago that included that proof. Alinea,
Okay.
I think. Well, do you know Alinea?
Mm-mm.
It's got 3 Michelin stars. It's
Okay.
one of the greatest restaurants on earth, and at one time, my production company was looking at doing a show with them. The
Mhm.
chef, Grant Achatz, insisted that I and my development chief come have dinner at Alinea. Now,
Okay.
what a shame. Alinea
A
is
hardship.
yeah, is a molecular style restaurant. Very
Okay.
strange foods done in very strange ways,
Mhm.
and it's fabulous. But halfway through this remarkable meal, a plate comes out of escoffier beef, the most traditional French presentation of beef that could possibly be done. Its provenance goes back hundreds of years, and it's there just to remind you, I know what the hell I'm doing. I started out doing this stuff. Now
Mhm.
continue to enjoy my evolution into molecular gastronomy.
Mhm.
It's a fabulous meal. Fabulous
Sounds
meal.
like it.
Oh yeah, well, let me put it this way. He wouldn't let us pay, but I needed to know what the meal cost so I could tip
Mhm.
appropriately. And he said, "Well, I don't know, 1,000, 1,200." I
Oh
said,
my
"Thank you." I
goodness.
said, "Thank you very much."
Wow. I don't think I've ever had a meal cost that much, although we don't go to three-star Michelin
Well,
restaurants.
it's interesting. There are meals that you can argue. I mean, what is the value of money to you? There
Mhm.
are meals I have had that I can completely justify that kind of stupid price tag. There are
Mhm.
also meals that charge that and you don't go to them more than, if it's your 30th anniversary. These are
Right.
super special occasion
Mhm.
meals. It's not everyday food.
Right.
But I recall being extremely disappointed. I took my wife to 11 Madison Park, which at one time was listed number 1 in the world on the 50 best restaurants list, and it has
Mhm.
3 Michelin stars and everyone loves it. And I was deeply disappointed, as was she. The food was good,
Mhm.
but it wasn't $2,000 good.
Right. There is, well, there was a restaurant here that was considered the best restaurant in town. It wasn't a $2,000 meal. Um, but I remember my husband and I went there for an anniversary, and I remember at the end of the meal going, "I could have made something better than this."
Yeah,
Like, it was okay, but it wasn't great.
now
Like, I
look,
remember getting a crème brûlée as dessert, and I'm just like, "No, like, I have made stuff better than this."
yeah, no, look, good food is good food.
Mhm.
Many, many restaurants are full of crap in telling you that their food is special and charging
Mhm.
appropriately. Other places deserve it.
Mhm.
We fell into a place in New York, and New York's a wonderful place because there's so much good food. But to me, what makes a food city is the fact that pretty much any restaurant you fall into is going to be damn good. That's what I love
Yeah.
about
Mhm.
Rome and Paris and Madrid. Well, to some extent, that's true in New York. We fell into a place we hadn't been before the other day and had one of the meals of our life. And later on Facebook, I mentioned it, and a bunch of my friends from all over the country said, "Oh, yeah, been there. It's great." I mean, great. Thanks for
Justified.
telling me. The other night, I was interviewed by South Korean television on this subject, food.
Mhm.
They're doing a documentary that includes American food. And I was taken after the interview by the delightful interviewer to what he says is, in his view, the best Korean restaurant in New York. Now, I don't know much about Korean food. The big
Mhm.
hole in my reporting career and my gastronomic research has been
Mhm.
Asian for the most part. And this was sort of a nouvelle take on Korean, he explained to me. Nothing we had
Okay.
was as you would have had it in someone's home, but it was phenomenal. It was just incredible. Now, I was the guest. We had a tasting menu. It was $200 a piece. I I personally would I told my wife I'm going to take it. I mean, there
Mhm.
was
Worth it.
absolute value in that meal. First of
Mhm.
all, it was something I had never had before.
Mhm.
Secondly, it was impeccably made. Thirdly, and this is really important, the service was friendly, not stuffy. You could joke with a waitress. Um, I'll give the place a plug. Its name is Genesis. It's owned by Hyundai. It's in their
Okay.
building because they have the Genesis luxury car.
Right.
And as my dinner guest explained to me, he has some connection to Hyundai. He said, they don't have to make money here. This is a branding element.
Okay.
So, okay, but I'll be back.
Right. It does, the best probably restaurant here is literally called The Hole in the Wall.
Hmm.
It's this tiny, tiny place,
Hmm.
and it's just one guy. He buys everything, he serves you, he cooks it, and he only buys, like, what he gets at the market, like, what's good at the market that day, and then he makes something out of it,
Well, but see,
and
that
it's
is
limited
so
plates.
European. It's what is there, what is
Mhm.
fresh, what is good.
Right.
Last night we were sitting around with a friend, and she and my wife had um, gone to a local. It's a combination nursery and little produce store, and
Mhm.
they picked up some cheese and some French bread and we're growing basil out back. So we put together a caprese, tomato
Mhm.
with mozzarella and basil, and some bread and a couple of really nice cheeses they picked up there, including one I'd never seen before, which is a combination brie and blue, which was just
Ooh.
phenomenal, and a chev.
I
And
love both of those. That sounds
yeah,
amazing.
we sat around dining on this for a while, and I thought to myself, I'm back in Europe. I'm in heaven.
Mhm.
This is just, it's good, pure, simple, wonderful, with taste that punches through. This same friend had given me a particularly good olive oil a couple of months ago, so I brought that out, and we were dipping in
Mhm.
that. Even though the Italians really don't dip bread in olive oil, it's an American creation. And I just felt to myself, this is how you should eat. It was
Mhm.
phenomenal. I'm sorry, I'm just waxing
No, that's
rhapsodic.
we have gotten a little off a topic. You did mention, or did maybe I made my brain made this up, but are you working on a new project?
I am. Well, first of all, I'm writing another book called,
Okay.
the working title is Eating While Standing. It's
Interesting.
everything from hot dog carts to food trucks to
Okay.
breakfast now being made fresh at convenience stores to the food at state fairs. We went to the Minnesota State
Uh-huh.
Fair when it was last held for this. So that's underway. But I've also recently started a syndicated radio show called Martini Music with David Page, which
Mm.
is focuses each week on artists of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's basically the Great
Mhm.
American Songbook and
Sounds
jazz.
wonderful.
And
That's like my autumn music.
oh, I'm having the most fun doing it. And I'm also reminding myself of just how good this stuff is. I mean,
Mhm.
the show I'm working on today is a singer few people today probably remember, who was never considered the top of the game when you put him up against Sinatra or Tony Bennett. But as I
Mhm.
listen to him, he's just wonderful. Vic Damone, who was fantastic after his early career as a pop star. He had a bunch of chart hits.
Mhm.
His most of his career was spent doing Great American Songbook classics in nightclub settings. And Frank Sinatra said the guy had the best pipes in the business. So I'm having a good time. And call your local radio station and tell them you want Martini Music with David Page, because syndication means you buy one station at a time, or they buy it.
Mhm.
And we're trying to grow our distribution. We're at a handful of stations right now, but growing.
Nice. Um, and to close up, so where can listeners find you online?
You can find me. There's a Food Americana Facebook page. There's a Food
Mhm.
Americana Instagram. And if you
Okay.
ask me or talk to me, I'll talk back. I answer.
Nice.
Um, yeah,
And where can they buy your book?
pretty much any place that'll sell you a book online. I send people to Amazon first
Mhm.
because their metrics count in the behind the scenes way, books are
Mhm.
marketing. But Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, Amazon, they've all got it. And I just financed my daughter's graduate education, so please buy 30 or 40 copies.
And I do recommend that listeners search for the title Food Americana, because I did find out in the course of research for this that there is another David Page author.
Oh, no.
Mhm.
Well,
Spelled the same way, so
litigation will ensue.
he's dead.
Oh, okay. There will be no litigation. I'm sorry.
Well, it was wonderful talking to you today. I had a great time.
It was a delight. Thank you very much for having me.
Read and Write Podcast is edited and produced by Deborah Zeeberth. Music was provided by Lofi Girl and can be found at lofigirl.com or on their YouTube channel. Audio effects were created by Red Octopus and Black River Phonogram. Show notes and previous episodes can be found at readandwritepodcast.com.